What starts as a simple business trip becomes a deadly game of deception when Emma's true identity is revealed. She's not just any employee, she's the daughter of David Chen, the tech mogul whose empire Sebastian helped destroy 15 years ago. Emma came for revenge, but she never expected to fall for the man she planned to destroy. All right, Dignity Stories, Z Crew. Settle in, this one's got emotions, secrets, and a twist that will leave you breathless. Asterisk, the woman who walked into the Blue Ridge dining room was not Emma Chen. Sebastian Stone's breath caught in his throat as he watched her descend the mahogany staircase, her hand trailing along the polished banister like water flowing over stone. The conservative blazer and wire-rimmed glasses had vanished, replaced by a midnight blue dress that moved like liquid shadow against her skin. Her dark hair cascaded in waves past her shoulders, no longer imprisoned in that severe bun. That was her eyes that stopped him cold, intelligent, defiant, and holding secrets deep enough to drown in. "Mr. Stone?" Right? Her voice carried a different timbre now, smoother, with an accent he couldn't place. "I hope you don't mind. Patricia packed some additional clothing for evening events?" The lie slipped from her lips with practiced ease, but Sebastian heard it for what it was. Patricia would never have packed a dress worth more than most people's cars. Wouldn't have known about the designer shoes that probably cost his assistant's monthly salary. "You look," he paused, his usual commanding vocabulary failing him. Round them, the dining room hummed with conversation from 35 of the country's most powerful executives. Crystal stemware, catching candlelight, servers moving with ballet-like precision. Yet all of it faded to background noise. Different. Emma's smile held shadows. "Perhaps you simply weren't looking before." Robert Hayes approached, champagne flute in hand, his weathered face creased with curiosity. "Sebastian, aren't you going to introduce us to your stunning companion?" "Emma Chen, my assistant," Sebastian managed, though the words felt inadequate. Robert's eyebrows shot up. "This is your assistant? It's the one from research?" He extended his hand to Emma with obvious appreciation. "My dear, you're full of surprises." "More than you know," Emma replied, accepting his handshake. Her fingers, Sebastian noticed, bore no calluses from typing, no ink stains from endless note-taking. They were soft, manicured, hands that had known luxury. The dinner progressed with the usual corporate theater-stratic discussions disguised as casual conversation. Power plays wrapped in polite laughter. But Sebastian found himself watching Emma navigate the social minefield with an ease that contradicted everything he thought he knew about her. She discussed market trends with Goldman's VP, as if she'd been trading commodities for decades. She made a tech billionaire laugh at a joke about quantum computing that went completely over Sebastian's head. "Where did you study economics?" asked Margaret Kim, CEO of Pacific Holdings. Emma's wineglass paused halfway to her lips, the briefest hesitation. "Columbia, though that feels like a lifetime ago." Columbia. Sebastian's mind raced. He'd attended Columbia, knew the economics program intimately. Emma spoke about professors, referenced obscure theories, described campus locations with the familiarity of someone who'd spent years there. But when he tried to place her in his memories of those halls, he found nothing. After dinner, the group migrated to the resort's private lounge, where aged whiskey flowed and cigars perfumed. "Mountain air." Emma excused herself, claiming fatigue, but Sebastian caught the relief in her eyes as she escaped the scrutiny. He waited 20 minutes before following. The resort grounds glowed under strategically placed lighting, gardens transformed into something from a fairy tale. He found Emma by the lake again, but this time she wasn't sitting peacefully. She paced the shore like a caged predator, her dress trailing in the grass, one hand pressed to her forehead as if fighting a headache. "Who are you?" The question came out harsher than he intended. Emma spun around, moonlight catching the tears. She was trying to hide. For a moment, her carefully constructed facade cracked completely. "What do you mean?" "Columbia Economics. Designer dress. The way you handled Margaret Kim's questions about derivatives trading. You're not a research assistant who needed this job." Sebastian stepped closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. You're slumming it in my company, and I want to know why." The silence stretched between them, filled with night sounds, in the gentle lapping of water against the shore. When Emma finally spoke, her voice was raw. "My name is Emma Chen. That part is true." She wrapped her arms around herself as if cold. "Everything else is more complicated. Try me. My family owned Chen Industries. Maybe you've heard of it." Sebastian's blood went cold. Chen Industries had been a tech giant 15 years ago, worth billions, until it imploded in a spectacular scandal involving embezzled funds and federal investigations. The CEO had disappeared, along with $200 million and thousands of destroyed lives. "David Chen was my father," Emma continued, her voice barely audible. "When everything collapsed, when the FBI raided our house and froze every account, when my mother couldn't handle the shame and took her own life, I had nothing. No one would hire a Chen, so I became someone else. I changed my hair, learned to dress down, mastered the art of invisibility. And you took a job with me," because Emma's laugh held no humor, "because Stone Industries acquired 3 of my father's former companies, because you profited from his downfall, because I've spent 2 years working my way close enough to understand how you dismantled everything he built." The betrayal hit Sebastian like a physical blow. "You're here for revenge." "I was." Emma turned to face him fully, and in the moonlight, he saw the daughter of David Chen, brilliant, dangerous, and carrying 15 years of carefully nursed rage. But then you had to be what? Human. The word came out like an accusation. "You know what I expected to find? A monster. A corporate raider who destroyed lives without conscience. Instead, I found someone who pays his employees above market rate, who funds scholarships for underprivileged kids, who visits Patricia in the hospital when she has surgery." Sebastian felt the ground shifting beneath him, his carefully ordered world tilting on its axis. "So what now?" Emma stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume, see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. "Now I'm more confused than I've ever been in my life. Because hating you was supposed to be simple, Sebastian. It was supposed to give me purpose. And now?" Her hand reached up to touch his face, fingers trembling against his jawline. "Now I think I'm falling for the man I came here to destroy." Before Sebastian could respond, before he could process the implications of her confession, Emma's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face went white. "What is it?" Emma's voice came out in a whisper. "Someone knows I'm here. Someone knows who I really am." She showed him the screen, a photo of them by the lake, taken just moments ago, with a message that made Sebastian's blood freeze. "Time to pay for Daddy's sins, Emma. Both of you." Sebastian's suite at Blue Ridge had been transformed into a war room by dawn. Emma sat curled in the leather armchair by the window, still wearing her midnight dress from the night before, while Sebastian paced the length of the room like a predator, planning an attack. Coffee grew cold on the mahogany table between them, untouched beside scattered financial documents and printed emails. "Tell me about the 200 million, Sebastian demanded, his voice cutting through the morning silence. Emma's fingers tightened around her phone, the threatening message still glowing on the screen. "I've told you everything I know." "Bullshit." Sebastian stopped pacing, turned to face her with the intensity that made corporate boards tremble. "Your father didn't just embezzle money and disappear. David Chen was brilliant, maybe more brilliant than me. He had contingency plans, backup accounts, safety nets. Where is the money, Emma? You think I know?" Emma's voice cracked, the composure she'd maintained for 18 months finally fracturing. "You think if I knew where $200 million was hidden, I'd be working as your assistant for $43,000 a year?" Sebastian studied her face, searching for deception, for the tells he'd learned to recognize in boardroom negotiations. Instead, he found something worse, a genuine pain mixed with a fear so deep it made his chest tighten. "Someone thinks you know," he said quietly. "Which means we need to figure out what you actually do know, even if you don't realize it." Emma stood abruptly, moving to the window that overlooked the resort's pristine lake. In daylight, the grounds looked innocent, pastoral, nothing like the threatening landscape they'd become. My father came home the night before the FBI raid. I was home from Colombia for winter break. He looked. She paused, searching for words. Haunted, terrified, he gave me something. Sebastian's pulse quickened. What? A music box. Been my grandmother's. Carved jade with a tiny ballerina inside. Said I should keep it safe, that someday I might understand why it mattered. Emma turned from the window, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I sold it 3 years ago when I couldn't make rent. Some antique dealer in Chinatown gave me $800 for it. Do you remember the dealer's name? Wong's Antiques on Mott Street? But Sebastian, it was just a music box. Sentimental value, nothing more. Sebastian was already reaching for his phone. In my experience, David Chen didn't do anything sentimental without purpose. We're going to New York. We can't just leave. The retreat is covered now, Emma. Whoever sent that message knows where we are, knows we're together. Staying here makes us sitting targets. Emma's phone buzzed again. This time, the message made her sink back into the chair, face draining of color. The music box has a secret little bird. Your father was cleverer than the FBI gave him credit for. Find it before we find you. Sebastian read the message over. Her shoulder, close enough to smell her perfume, feel the tremor running through her body. Pack. Now, we leave in 10 minutes. The drive to New York took them through mountain highways that wound like serpents through the Virginia wilderness. Sebastian pushed the Bentley harder than he should have, taking curves that made the tires scream their protest. In the passenger seat, Emma sat rigid, her overnight bag clutched in her lap like armor. Tell me about your father, Sebastian said as they descended toward the interstate. Not the corporate raider story the media created, the man who raised you. Emma was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, her voice soft as silk against steel. He taught me to play chess when I was 7, not the children's version real chess with all its complexity and brutality. He said business was like chess, except the pieces were people's lives and the stakes were survival. Smart man. Smart enough to know he was in trouble months before the raid. Smart enough to hide assets where the FBI couldn't find them. And smart enough to know that someday his daughter might need what he'd hidden. Her, seeing David Chen's intelligence in the sharp angles of her face, the calculating way she processed information. What else did he teach you? That trust is a luxury poor people can't afford. That love is a weakness enemies exploit. That in the end, everyone betrays everyone else. It's just a matter of price and timing. Do you believe that? Emma's laugh held no warmth. I believed it until last night, when you could have thrown me to the wolves and chose not to. When you could have had me arrested for corporate espionage and instead offered to help. She turned to look at him directly. Why are you helping me, Sebastian? The question hung between them like a challenge. Sebastian found himself gripping the steering wheel tighter, watching the road blur past while his mind raced through acceptable answers. The truth was too complicated, too dangerous for both of them. Maybe I want to know what happened to David Chen as much as you do. That's not why. Sebastian's jaw tightened.
Then why?
Go. Because last night, when I told you who I really was, you looked at me like I mattered. Not as an asset or a threat or a problem to be solved, but as a person worth saving. Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. No one has looked at me that way in 15 years. The admission hit Sebastian like a sucker punch, threatening the emotional barriers he'd spent decades constructing. He'd built his empire by keeping people at arm's length, by seeing relationships as transactions and emotions as liabilities. Emma Chen was supposed to be another acquisition, another piece moved across his personal chessboard. Instead, she was becoming something far more dangerous. They reached Manhattan as storm clouds gathered over the Hudson River, turning the sky the color of old pewter. Chinatown pulsed with its usual chaotic energy vendors, hawking fresh fish on ice. Elderly women haggling over vegetables in rapid Cantonese, teenagers weaving through crowds with the fluid grace of urban predators. Wong's Antiques occupied a narrow storefront between a dim sum restaurant and a shop selling traditional medicines. The window display featured jade figurines, porcelain vases, and furniture that looked like it had survived several dynasties. A bell chimed as they entered, and the scent of sandalwood incense wrapped around them like smoke. The man behind the counter looked ancient, his face a map of wrinkles that suggested he'd seen enough history to fill several lifetimes. He glanced up from examining a piece of calligraphy, his eyes sharp as obsidian. "We don't buy from tourists," he said in accented English. "We're not selling," Emma replied in fluent Mandarin. "We're looking for information about a music box sold here 3 years ago." The old man's expression shifted, becoming guarded. He responded in Mandarin, too quickly for Sebastian to follow, but he caught Emma's sharp intake of breath. "What did he say?" Sebastian demanded. Emma's face had gone white. "He says the music box is gone, sold 2 days after I brought it here, but he remembers the buyer." She turned to Sebastian, her voice barely above a whisper. It was Patricia. Before Sebastian could process this revelation, the front window exploded inward in a shower of glass and noise. 3 men in dark suits pushed through the wreckage, and Sebastian realized with cold clarity that their hunt had become a chase, and they were no longer the hunters. The back alley behind Wang's Antiques reeked of rotting vegetables and decades of accumulated secrets. Sebastian pressed himself against the brick wall, Emma's body trembling against his as they listened to the sounds of destruction from inside. The shop, glass continued to shatter, furniture overturned, the old man's voice rising in angry Cantonese. "They're not just looking for information," Emma whispered, her breath hot against Sebastian's ear. "They're erasing evidence." Sebastian pulled out his phone, fingers moving quickly across the screen. "Trisha's apartment is 20 minutes from here. She has the music box, if she has it. She's been playing us from the beginning." Emma's voice carried a bitterness that cut deeper than the winter air. 8 years, Sebastian. Your trusted assistant has been sitting on the key to my father's hidden fortune for 8 years. The alley exit led to a maze of narrow streets where food vendors prepared lunch for the afternoon rush. Sebastian and Emma moved through the crowds like ghosts, keeping their heads down, using the chaos of urban life as cam-overs. Sebastian's Bentley was parked 6 blocks away, probably being watched, definitely compromised. "We need another car," Sebastian said, scanning the street for options. Emma grabbed his arm, pulling him toward a subway entrance. "Underground first. They'll be watching the streets." The train car smelled of humanity and desperation. Fluorescent lights flickering over faces that had learned not to make eye contact. Emma sat across from Sebastian, her designer dress incongruous among the afternoon commuters. But her expression had hardened into something urban and survivable. "Tell me about Patricia," she said quietly. Sebastian found himself remembering his assistant differently now, seeing 8 years of perfect service through the lens of potential deception. "She came to me after David Chen's arrest, said she'd been working for a small firm that went under, needed a fresh start. Convenient timing. I thought so too initially. But she was perfect and accepted my needs, managed my schedule, handled sensitive information with absolute discretion." Sebastian paused, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Always knew which companies were vulnerable, which executives had secrets worth exploiting. Emma's eyes glittered. "With understanding, she wasn't just your assistant, Sebastian. She was his, my father's inside source. Patricia wasn't working for Yush, was working for David Chen, feeding him information about Stone Industries while Yush dismantled his empire piece by piece." The train screeched to a halt at 42nd Street, and Sebastian felt his world tilting further off its axis. If Patricia had been feeding information to David Chen, if she had access to his hidden assets, then everything Sebastian thought he knew about his own success was built on lies. They emerged from the subway into Times Square's assault of neon and noise. Patricia lived on the Upper East Side, in a modest apartment that Sebastian had always assumed reflected her middle-class salary. Now, he wondered what other secrets she'd been hiding behind that facade of efficient normalcy. Emma hailed a taxi with the kind of authority that came from growing up wealthy, sliding into the back seat with fluid grace. "East 78th and Lexington," she told the driver. Sebastian settled beside her, close enough to feel the tension radiating from her body. "What happens when we find the music box? Then we find out what my father really hid, and why people are willing to kill for it 15 years later? And Patricia? Emma's smile held winter. Patricia gets to explain why she destroyed my life to build yours. The taxi fought its way through Manhattan traffic, dodging delivery trucks and aggressive cyclists, while the driver provided a running commentary on the city's declining morality. Sebastian found himself watching Emma's reflection in the window seeing. Not the invisible assistant who'd worked for him for 18 months, but the brilliant daughter of a brilliant man, shaped by loss into something dangerous and unpredictable. You planned this from the beginning, he said quietly. What? Getting close to me? You didn't randomly end up in my company, you engineered it? The question is how deep your infiltration goes. Emma turned from the window, her eyes meeting his. Directly? You want the truth, Sebastian? I've had access to your personal files for 6 months. Your financial records, your strategic plans, your private communications. I could have destroyed Stone Industries any time I wanted. Sebastian felt cold rage building in his chest. Why didn't you? It's because I realized you weren't the villain in my story. You were just another player in David Chen's game, moving pieces you didn't even know were on the board. Patricia's building was a pre-war structure with doormen who remembered when the neighborhood had character instead of just money. Sebastian walked through the lobby like he owned it, his presence enough to make the concierge nod respectfully. Instead of asking questions, the elevator climbed 14 floors in silence, each number marking another step toward answers Sebastian wasn't sure he wanted. Patricia's apartment occupied the building's southeast corner, with windows that would offer views of Central Park if anyone cared about such things. Sebastian used the key Patricia had given him for emergencies, the lock turning with a soft click that sounded loud as gunshot in the empty hallway. The apartment beyond was exactly what he'd expected: tasteful, modest, unremarkable in every way except for what it represented. Emma moved through the rooms with practiced efficiency, checking drawers, examining closets, searching for anything that didn't belong to a middle-class assistant living alone. Sebastian found himself drawn to Patricia's desk, where 8 years of perfect service was documented in neat files and careful handwriting. Sebastian. Emma's voice came from the bedroom, tight with discovery. You need to see this. He found Emma standing before an open safe, her face white as bone. Inside the steel cavity sat the jade music box, its carved surface gleaming under the bedroom's soft lighting. But it wasn't alone. Stacked beside it were documents that made Sebastian's blood freeze. Financial records showing wire transfers from Stone Industries to offshore accounts, strategic plans that had given Sebastian decisive advantages in acquisitions, and photographs, dozens of them, showing Sebastian in private moments. Unguarded conversations, intimate dinners with women whose names had never appeared in any tabloid. She's been documenting your life for 8 years, Emma whispered, building a file comprehensive enough to destroy you completely. Sebastian reached past her to lift the music box, its weight familiar and foreign at the same time. The tiny ballerina inside was frozen mid-pirouette, waiting for someone to wind the key and bring her to life. There's more, Emma said, her voice breaking. She held up a manila folder marked with Sebastian's name and Patricia's precise handwriting. Inside were medical records from a private clinic, DNA test results, and a birth certificate that made Sebastian's world collapse entirely. The birth certificate bore Patricia's real name, Patricia Chen, and listed David Chen as her father. She's your sister, Sebastian said, the words feeling impossible in his mouth. Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. My half-sister. From an affair my father had while building his empire. It's a sister I never knew existed, who's been watching me work for the man who destroyed our family while she built a new life from the ashes. The music box felt heavier in Sebastian's hands, weighted with 15 years of secrets and betrayal. When he wound the key, the ballerina began to turn, and hidden compartments opened in the base, revealing microchips small enough to hide anywhere and dangerous enough to topple governments. David Chen didn't just steal $200 million, Emma whispered as the music played its haunting melody. He stole government contracts, defense secrets, technological innovations worth billions. And Patricia has been guarding his legacy while playing both sides of a game we didn't even know existed. The apartment's front door opened with a soft click. And Patricia's voice drifted down the hallway, speaking to someone on her phone. Yes, I have them both here. No, they found the box, just as you predicted. The transfer will be complete within the hour. Sebastian and Emma exchanged a look of pure terror as they realized the trap had been closing around them for months, maybe years. Patricia wasn't just David Chen's daughter or Sebastian's assistant. She was the architect of everything that had brought them to this moment, and they were about to discover exactly what David Chen had been willing to die to protect. Patricia stood in her own doorway like an avenging angel in a tailored business suit, her phone held casually at her side, her face wearing an expression Sebastian had never seen before, cold satisfaction mixed with something that might have been regret. "Hello, Emma," she said softly. "It's been a long time since I saw you without your disguise." Emma clutched the music box against her chest like armor. "How long have you known?" "Since the day you walked into Stone Industries with your fake references and your carefully constructed invisibility." Patricia stepped into the apartment, closing the door behind her with deliberate precision. "Did you really think you could investigate our father's empire without me noticing?" Sebastian felt the betrayal cutting deeper than any business deal gone wrong, any hostile takeover, any board coup he'd survived. "Our father." Patricia's smile held no warmth. "David Chen was a complicated man, Sebastian. He built his empire on other people's secrets while keeping his own locked away. The affair with my mother was just one of many, but I was the only child he acknowledged outside his marriage." "So you've been planning this for 15 years. Emma's voice carried the kind of fury that could level cities. "Watching me struggle, watching me grieve, knowing you could have helped." "Helped?" Patricia laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut glass. "Emma, you were supposed to die with mother and father. The plane crash in Switzerland was meant to eliminate the entire Chen family line. I saved your life by letting you think you were alone." Sebastian's blood went cold. "Plane crash?" David Chen wasn't arrested, was murdered, along with his wife and the daughter everyone knew about. Patricia moved to her window, gazing out at Central Park like a queen surveying her kingdom. The FBI raid was theater, designed to make the world believe David Chen was a simple embezzler who fled with stolen money. The truth was far more dangerous. Emma set the music box on Patricia's coffee table with trembling hands. "What truth?" "Our father didn't steal government contracts, Emma. He created them. David Chen was a CIA asset for 20 years, using his tech empire to steal industrial secrets from foreign governments. The $200 million wasn't embezzled funds, it was payment for services rendered to the United States government." Sebastian felt pieces of the puzzle rearranging themselves in ways that made his head spin. Then why kill him? Because David got greedy. Started selling information to both sides? Playing American intelligence against Chinese intelligence, while building his own private fortune. Patricia turned from the window, her eyes holding depths of calculation Sebastian recognized from there. Years working together, when the CIA discovered his double game, they decided to eliminate the problem permanently. "But you survived," Emma said quietly. "I survived because I was already embedded in the American intelligence network. My recruitment began when I was 16. Patricia Chen transformed into Patricia Williams, given a new identity and a clear mission." Patricia's professional mask finally cracked, revealing something raw underneath. "Infiltrate Sebastian Stone's organization. Monitor his acquisition of David Chen's former assets. Wait for Emma Chen to resurface." Mez's face went white. "I was the real target. You were the loose end they couldn't afford to leave hanging. David's brilliant daughter, trained in economics and strategy, carrying genetic access codes that could unlock encrypted files worth billions." Patricia reached into her jacket, and Sebastian tensed, expecting a weapon. Instead, she produced a small device that looked like a modified smartphone. "The music box was never the treasure, Emma. You are." Sebastian stepped between the sisters, his protective instincts overriding his confusion. "What does that mean?" "DNA-locked encryption," Patricia explained with the patience of someone teaching a complex lesson. David Chen embedded his most sensitive files behind genetic locks that could only be opened by direct family members. The music box contains the hardware. Emma contains the biological key. Emma backed away from both of them, understanding flooding her features. That's why you needed us together. Why you orchestrated the retreat, the attack in Chinatown, leading us here. You needed me to trust Sebastian enough to cooperate. I needed Sebastian to care about you enough to protect you during the extraction process. Patricia's voice softened, with something that might have been genuine affection. And I needed you to care about him enough to cooperate when the time came. Sebastian felt the walls closing in around them. Extraction process. The genetic locks require living tissue samples, Sebastian. Bone marrow, to be specific. The process is unpleasant, but survivable if performed correctly. Emma laughed. The sound brittle and desperate. And if I refuse? Patricia raised the device, and Sebastian realized it wasn't a phone, it was a trigger. Then the explosive charges I've placed throughout this building will ensure that David Chen's secrets die. With all of us, the CIA prefers clean endings. The apartment fell silent except for the ticking of Patricia's antique clock, marking seconds that felt like heartbeats in a dying patient's chest. Sebastian found himself calculating odds, escape routes, ways to turn this confrontation in their favor. But Patricia had played this game longer than either of them. With resources and backing, they couldn't match. There is another option, Patricia said quietly. One that lets Emma live and gives Sebastian what he's always wanted, which is David Chen's complete files. Every industrial secret, every government contract, every piece of leverage he accumulated over 30 years of playing all sides. Patricia moved to her safe, withdrawing a tablet that hummed with electronic life. Information that could make Stone Industries the most powerful corporation in human history. Sebastian stared at the tablet, seeing his empire's future written. In pixels and possibility, everything he'd worked for, everything he'd sacrificed, handed to him on a digital platter. The ultimate acquisition. What's the catch? Patricia's smile held winter. Emma cooperates with the extraction, provides the genetic material needed to unlock the files, and disappears forever, with a new identity and enough money to live comfortably anywhere in the world. And if I refuse? Emma asked. Then you both die here today, and David Chen's secrets die with you. The CIA cleans up the loose ends, Stone Industries continues as it is, and the world never knows what might have been. Sebastian looked between the sisterson, offering him ultimate power, the other representing something he'd never expected to find in his carefully ordered world. Emma Chen had walked into his life as a lie, revealed herself as a threat, and somehow become the first person in decades who made him question what he truly wanted. The choice should have been simple. Power versus sentiment. Empire versus emotion. Everything he'd built versus a woman he'd known for 3 days. Instead, Sebastian, stonemaster of his universe, architect of a billion-dollar empire, found himself facing the hardest decision of his life. Emma met his eyes across the room, and he saw her decision reflected there. She was going to sacrifice herself to save him, just as he realized he was willing to sacrifice everything to save her. But Patricia had made one crucial mistake in her calculations. She'd underestimated what two people were willing to do when they discovered they had something worth fighting for. Sebastian's hand moved faster than thought, snatching the jade music box from the coffee table and hurling it against the apartment's window with enough force to shatter both the antique and the glass. The ballerina broke free from her eternal dance, ceramic fragments raining onto Patricia's Persian rug while winter air rushed into the room. The building across the street, he said to Emma without taking his eyes off Patricia. Sniper position. 3rd floor corner window. I saw the scope reflection when we arrived. Patricia's professional composure cracked. How did you 23 years building an empire teaches you to watch for threats from every angle? Sebastian stepped sideways, positioning himself between Emma and the window. Your CIA friends were supposed to take us out if the negotiation failed, weren't they? Clean ending? No witnesses? Emma moved toward the broken window, understanding flashing in her dark eyes. But now their angle is compromised. Their primary asset is about to become a liability. Sebastian watched Patricia's hand tighten on the trigger device. Tell me, Patricia, when this is over, when you've delivered David Chen's secrets and eliminated his daughters, what happens to the woman who knows too much? For the first time since entering the apartment, Patricia looked uncertain. They promised me protection. It's a new identity, Enough money to disappear. They promised David Chen the same thing. Emma's voice carried the weight of 15 years of accumulated pain. How did that work out for our father? The silence stretched between the three of them while wind from the broken window scattered papers across Patricia's carefully organized life. In the distance, sirens wailed fire department, police, or something else entirely, rushing toward a crisis they couldn't see coming. Sebastian made his choice. Emma, the fire escape. Now, Sebastian, go. I'll be right behind you. But instead of running, Emma stepped closer to Patricia, her face soft with an emotion Sebastian couldn't identify. Come with us. Patricia's laugh held no humor. You don't understand. There is no us anymore. There is no escape from what I've become. There's always a choice, Emma said quietly. Father taught me that. Even when all the choices are terrible, we still get to choose which terrible thing we can live with. What can you live with, Emma? Knowing I've watched you struggle for 15 years. Knowing I used Sebastian's feelings for you to manipulate both of you into this room. Emma reached out, her hand touching Patricia's cheek with infinite gentleness. I can live with forgiving my sister. The question is whether you can live with forgiving yourself. Patricia's composure finally shattered completely. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at the trigger device in her hand, then at the tablet containing David Chen's legacy of secrets. They'll never stop hunting us. Information is too valuable. The security breach too significant. Then we make sure the information becomes worthless, Sebastian said. Both sisters turned to stare at him. We release it. Everything. David Chen's files, the CIA's involvement, the true story behind his death. Information only has power when it's secret. Make it public, and it becomes worthless. Patricia stared at him as if he'd suggested setting fire to the Federal Reserve. That would destroy governments, topple corporations, kill thousands of intelligence assets worldwide. It would set us free. Sebastian moved to Patricia's computer, fingers already dancing across the keyboard. Emma, I need your DNA sample on that music box chip. Patricia, I need your access codes, Sebastian. You don't understand what you're asking. I understand perfectly. His voice carried the authority that had built Stone Industries from nothing. Your father spent 30 years accumulating secrets that eventually killed him. We end that cycle today, or it kills all of us. Emma picked up a shard of the broken ballerina, using its sharp edge to prick her finger. Blood droplets fell onto the exposed microchip, which immediately began glowing with soft blue light. Genetic locks disengaged with audible clicks, and the apartment's silence filled with the hum of awakening electronics. Patricia's hands shook as she entered her access codes. This will destroy everything our father built. Our father built his empire on other people's secrets and died for it, Emma replied softly. Maybe it's time to build something different. The files began transferring to Sebastian's secure servers, terabytes of information that represented 3 decades of international espionage, corporate manipulation, and governmental corruption. Industrial secrets that could shift global power balances, personal information that could topple world leaders, financial records that could collapse entire economies. Sebastian watched the upload progress bar crawl toward completion while calculating the implications. Releasing this information wouldn't just free the MIT, would reshape the world's understanding of how power actually functioned in the shadows between governments and corporations. 60 seconds until upload completion, he announced. Patricia, make your choice. Die here defending secrets that aren't yours, or live free with the family you tried to protect. Patricia looked at the trigger device in her hand, then at Emma's blood on the microchip, then at the tablet displaying their father's legacy in digital form. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I've been Patricia Williams. For so long, I forgot what it felt like to be Patricia Chen. She dropped the trigger device. Sebastian heard it clatter across the hardwood floor, like dice in a cosmic game where the stakes were measured in lives rather than money. The upload completed with a soft chime. It's done, Sebastian said. Everything goes live in 12 hours unless I personally cancel the release. Which means we have 12 hours to disappear before every intelligence agency in the world comes looking for us. Emma moved to the broken window, looking out at a city that was about to learn some uncomfortable truths about itself. "We go? Anywhere we want," Sebastian replied, realizing that for the first time in his adult life, the answer was literally true. "I have resources they can't touch, accounts they can't freeze, properties they can't find." Patricia joined Emma at the window, the two sisters standing together for the first time in 15 years. "They'll never stop hunting us." "Let them hunt," Emma said quietly. "We'll be too busy living to worry about dying." Sebastian watched the Chen sisters embrace, seeing in their reunion something he'd never experienced himself, the possibility that family might be more powerful than empire, that love might be more valuable than leverage. It was a foreign concept to a man who'd built his world on calculating the cost of everything and trusting the price of nothing. But as Emma turned to him with tears in her eyes and hope in her smile, Sebastian Stone discovered that some things couldn't be measured in quarterly reports or acquisition statements. Some things were worth more than money, more valuable than power, more lasting than empires. 6 months later, in a small cafe overlooking the Mediterranean, Sebastian read news reports about the global upheaval caused by the Chen Files release. Governments had fallen, corporations had collapsed, the entire intelligence community had been forced to rebuild from the ground up. Emma sat across from him, her hair shorter now, her clothes simpler, her face carrying the piece of someonehood. Finally stopped running from ghosts. Patricia had chosen a different kind of disappearance, working with international humanitarian organizations to help other people escape the shadows she'd once inhabited. "Any regrets?" Emma asked, gesturing toward the newspaper headlines that described the chaos they'd unleashed. Sebastian considered the question seriously. He'd given up a billion-dollar empire, abandoned everything he'd spent his adult life building, walked away from power most people couldn't imagine possessing. In exchange, he'd gained something he'd never known he was missing. "Just one," he said finally. Emma's face clouded with concern. "What?" Sebastian reached across the table, taking her hand in his, feeling the wedding ring they'd exchanged in a small ceremony on a Greek island where no one asked questions about their past. "I regret that it took me 42 years to understand the difference between having everything and having enough." Emma's smile could have powered the entire Mediterranean coastline. "And now I have enough." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over water that stretched toward horizons they were free to explore. Behind them lay the wreckage of empires built on secrets and maintained through fear. Ahead lay possibilities neither had dared imagine when they were still pretending to be people they weren't. The world would rebuild itself, as it always did. New powers would rise, new secrets would be born, new empires would emerge from the ashes of the old. But Sebastian and Emma would face those changes together, having learned that the most dangerous gamble wasn't risking everything for power. It was risking everything for love, and discovering that sometimes love was the only thing worth winning. Asterix, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more emotional stories. What did you think of Sebastian and Emma's story? Share your thoughts in the comments below.